When I was about 13, I was waiting for the bus at the end of my driveway. I lived in the country and it was fairly light outside. I had waited at the end of that driveway hundreds of times ever since I was a young child. Many times I even stood at the end of it by myself after my parents took off for work. That was not one of the days that I had to be home alone, but my mother did stay inside as usual. She suffered from a bit of a prescription drug problem, which oftentimes incapacitated her and left her unable to get up from the sofa. It was one of those mornings. As I waited, a silver SUV started to pull over to the side of the road right in front of me. I stepped back a little, surprised, and giving the vehicle some space to park beside the road. We lived in a very small rural community, so it was not uncommon for random neighbors I did not know to pull in and want to talk to my dad. However, this was a car I had never seen before, and the people inside were people I had never seen before as well. Nevertheless, I shrugged it off and decided to see what they wanted. I had never been taught about stranger danger or any of that. We didn't learn about those things in my community back then. They rolled down the passenger side window and revealed that they were an elderly couple. They were both dressed rather well and seemed to be friendly, as the woman smiled at me and beckoned me towards her sweetly. I did not get too close, but I did approach her. I wish I could say it was against my better judgment, but it honestly wasn't. I just didn't know any better. "Are you from here?" the woman asked. "We need some directions." "Yes, I am from here," I said. "What are you looking for?" "Do you know where the feed store is?" the man asked, before telling me he was from the neighboring town. I frowned. The feed store was a local place that farmers went, and every local knew how to get there. Even people in the neighboring town would know, so it was a bit strange for someone to not know where it was. But I just assumed that they were old and forgetful. My grandma forgot where things were fairly often, so I thought it wasn't too strange. I gave them very thorough directions and assumed they would drive away. But they didn't. "So it's that road right there?" the old woman asked, pointing to a nearby dirt road. I furrowed my brow. I had stated very specifically that the first intersection was another few miles up the road, so I corrected her. The woman gave me a blank stare with wide eyes and shook her head. The man's eyes were starting to dart from her to me, and I noticed he looked uncomfortable. There were cars driving around them, and they did not seem to like that much. But I was too young to realize what was making them nervous. I assumed they were just desperately looking for the feed store. "So it's that one?" the woman asked, pointing to a different nearby dirt road. I nearly scowled, but I had always been taught to be polite to old people, so I shook my head. Then the woman did something strange. She started to open her car door, smiling widely at me and reaching towards me. She did not get out entirely, but she shot a glance at a red car that was passing their car, which was still parked on the side of the main road. I quickly took a few steps back and turned to look at the front door of my house, irate with my mother for being too stoned to check on me. "Why don't you just show us where it is?" she asked, reaching closer. Suddenly, the front door of my house burst open, and there was my mother. Although she was still high and certainly not aware of the situation, I truly believe she had to have some sort of sixth sense to open that door, because the lady quickly closed her door and the old man floored the accelerator. They were gone, and they did not go anywhere near the feed store. My mother wandered outside in her pink fuzzy slippers, groggy and irate. She rubbed her forehead and gave me a strange look. "Who was that?" she asked. "I don't know. They wanted directions to the feed store," I told her. "They were just old people." My mother looked uncomfortable, but she accepted my answer and went back inside, undoubtedly to get high again. I got on the bus and forgot all about the weird couple for the day and for the next week, because nothing was out of the ordinary. Then the Sunday newspaper came. My mother was high, as usual, flipping through it in a very casual manner. Suddenly, her face became pale. At first, I thought she was overdosing, which I had unfortunately seen before. I rushed to her to make sure she was okay, but it wasn't an OD at all. Her eyes were wide and full of horror, and all she did was point at an article. It was not a big article. It actually took up a part in the newspaper not much larger than a single obituary or a wedding announcement. However, the content was life-changing. As I looked at the article, I saw 4 very small pictures. 2 were the old man and woman that I had seen a week prior, and the other 2 were of a small boy and a girl about my age. I had hardly even thought about the encounter until that moment, and what I read terrified me. The couple had been caught in the neighboring town. They had lied about their location, claiming they were from a town slightly nicer than the one where the newspaper said they were found. I noticed that immediately. Then the article went on to say that they had been keeping a young boy, only 6 years old, in their basement. He was in diapers, being starved, and being abused, both sexually and physically. They had been selling his body to local meth users. As if that was not disturbing enough, there was also a girl. She was 14 and emaciated, but she looked like me. She had the same blonde hair and bright eyes. I imagine she probably looked much more like me once before she went through what she did. The people had supposedly locked her in a closet. They starved her. They sexually abused her, not only genitally, but also with some disturbing tools of some sort. The girl lived, astoundingly, but the article did not go into detail regarding her physical and mental health. I cannot imagine what that poor girl went through, and I'm just thankful that I never joined her in that closet.